So welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to lecture number 3 of Science and Technology in this lecture series called Prelims Powerplay 2026. Now, today we are going to talk about green biotechnology. This is our topic of discussion for today. Now, if you have watched lecture number 1 for Science and Technology, well, you know what green biotechnology is. Biotechnology applications for the field of agriculture. We talked about red biotechnology in the previous lecture. Today is the turn for green biotechnology. So all the current affairs, all the important developments and the associated static topics related to green biotechnology, which are very important for your prelims examination this time, will be discussed in today's lecture. So today's lecture will comprehensively cover all talking points, basically information about green biotechnology. Okay, you need not look elsewhere. All things related to green biotechnology from where questions can be asked in your prelims examination would be covered today. Okay, so well, let's talk about green biotechnology, biotechnology for agriculture. So let's begin, okay, without further ado. So science and technology lecture number 3, green biotechnology, which is biotechnology for agriculture. Okay, now first let's take a look at the topics we shall cover today in green biotechnology. Okay, which topics, which portions we would cover with respect to green biotechnology. So today we'll be covering 4 topics only. Number 1, the most famous application of green biotechnology, and that is GM crops, genetically modified crops. Okay, so we'll talk about GM crops and their situation, regulatory framework in India. Then we'll talk about GE crops. Now, GE crops also involve genetic editing of crops, right? But GE crops are different from GM crops. So what's the difference between the two? What is India doing about it? Has India created any new editing tool for this? We'll talk about this point. Then we'll talk about CRISPR gene editing technology and India's very own TNPB gene editing technology, which was recently released by India in November. So we'll talk about these two gene editing techniques for crops. And in the end, we'll talk about an initiative of the government called Biotech KISAN. We'll not talk much about it. Just some important information with respect to this would be discussed in the lecture. But most of the information, most of the talking points, most of the remembering points would be given in your notes. So do memorize your notes. In fact, we will discuss a lot with respect to all 4 topics. But some extra information which is relevant for your prelims exams would be given in your notes. So please do not forget to memorize whatever is discussed in this lecture and in your notes. Do not forget to memorize that. Please do not forget to memorize that. It's very important. Plus, one more point. If you have any doubts, you already are enrolled in our WhatsApp groups. Ask your doubts over there. Clear? So these are the 4 topics that we shall zero in our attention on. So let's start discussing them one by one. Starting with topic number 1, and that is genetically modified crops. You see, well, GM crops, very simply put, are those crops whose DNA has been modified. Now, how has that DNA been modified? Well, the thing is that, well, there is a crop, let's suppose a cotton seed. You take its DNA and insert a foreign gene into that DNA. We have done this. There is a particular GM crop in India, which is called BT cotton. We'll talk about this. In BT cotton, we have introduced a gene from bacteria. Okay, that gene in that bacteria used to produce certain proteins which repel many insects. Now, when you add that particular bacterial gene into this cotton seed, cotton crop, cotton also starts to produce those enzymes, those proteins which repel insects. Generally, cotton crops in India, they suffer from insect attacks, pest attacks. Now, these crops naturally produce some proteins, enzymes which repel these insects or pests. So there is no need for farmers to basically spray insecticides and pesticides. This is one application. There are so many applications. You can make the crop drought resistant. Okay, you can make the crop salt resistant. Some soils are saline. You can make the crop salt resistant. You can improve nutritional content in a crop by introducing foreign genes. Number 1 example is golden rice. That particular form of rice, that particular form of GM rice has a lot of vitamin A. Then there is this new experiment called Provato. Potato is full of carbohydrates. If you genetically modify potato so that it produces proteins, then you are having potato, enjoying potatoes, but you're also basically fulfilling your protein requirements, right? All these things, all this magic can be done through gene editing, genetic modification of crops. Okay, so it's a very advanced field. Okay, so let's talk about GM crops in India. What is the situation in India? Which type of crops, GM crops in India, are allowed? All right, so GM crops. Okay, so about GM crops. So GM crops are plants whose DNA has been altered using genetic engineering techniques, obviously, by inserting genes. This is very important. By inserting genes from other organisms, mostly it's bacteria, but you can add viral genes also, genes from viruses, to enhance characteristics like pest resistance, insect resistance, drought resistance, or nutritional value. Okay, like improving vitamin A content, improving protein content, all of this can be done because you're just modifying the genes of that crop. So you can play with anything. Some famous examples of GM crops are BT cotton, which is grown in India. Okay, 90% of cotton grown in India is BT cotton. Engineered for bollworm resistance. Cotton crops in India used to suffer from insect attacks, pest attacks, particularly pink bollworm. This pink bollworm insect used to attack cotton crops, destroy cotton crops, and farmers would suffer. Therefore, farmers had to spray a lot of insecticide to protect their cotton crops from this bollworm insect. And because of that, because of so much spraying of pesticide, well, these pesticides don't come for cheap. Okay, these pesticides don't come for free also. So cost of farming also increased. Okay, but BT cotton naturally produces those proteins, enzymes that resist pink bollworm. It has been grown in India since 2002. Then another example is golden rice, modified to produce beta carotene for vitamin A deficiency mitigation. Rice doesn't contain vitamin A, but golden rice does. So it will remove vitamin A deficiencies in people, in populations where there is vitamin A deficiency and where rice is a staple diet. Rice is part of your staple diet, right? Then herbicide tolerant soya bean, maize, they are also, produced. So in these soya bean crops and maize crops, you don't have to spray herbicides, okay, weedicides, so many things. So there are so many advantages, right? But, well, the thing is that it has a lot of benefits you have just seen, but it has some concerns also. There is a reason why, despite having so many options, India only allows BT cotton. Surely there are some problems with GM crops. So let's talk about benefits and concerns. Okay. So benefits, GM crops boost yield by 22% because no pest attack or insect attack. Cut pesticide use by 37%. So this is money saved by farmers, which is very important for farmers, right? Support sustainable farming like no-till practices, no fertilizer requirement also. If you modify the DNA of the plant in such a way that there is not much requirement of fertilizers, pesticides, all of this is great. But there are certain challenges as well. Challenges include potential biodiversity loss. You see, BT cotton produces those enzymes which destroy pink bollworm insect, but it also destroys other bacteria, other insects also. Now, biodiversity in an agricultural field is important. But if you use more and more BT cotton, it not only destroys pink bollworm, it destroys other organisms, microorganisms as well, which can be harmful for your agricultural practices, okay, or field biodiversity, right? So this is one problem. And because of this, many environmental activists don't want GM crops. They think this would destroy the environment. Then super weeds. Sometimes some weeds, you create a GM crop that is weed resistant. Okay, so they produce those enzymes which resist or destroy weeds. But sometimes weeds also evolve to resist these enzymes. No impact is there on these particular form of weeds of this enzyme. Okay, these are called super weeds. They will start destroying these crops and you have to spray weedicides. Then public health debates. People say, and there is no evidence though, but people say that if you are eating GM rice, maybe it will have long-term health impact. It can, because your body is used to normal rice, which nature has produced. But now you are altering the DNA of this rice. Once you alter the DNA of this rice, well, you are eating altered DNA rice. Now, there is no evidence that it impacts your health, but We don't know about the long-term impact. Okay, so we don't know. That is why there are many activists who are saying that don't consume GM crops. Okay, now there is a specific reason, because India is also skeptical that there can be public health crisis or there can be a public health problem. That is why India only allows cotton as far as GM crops are concerned, which is a non-food crop. It is not consumed by you, right? Consumed as part of your diet. So India doesn't allow food crops, GM food crops, because of this reason also. Okay, though there is no evidence, but you never know what will happen in future or what is happening inside your body. We still only know 50% of our body. Scientists still know. They don't know the delicate mechanisms happening in our body, so we don't know. And because we are skeptical in that regard, that is why, and many people are against, many activists are against, health activists, environmental activists, that is why India has only permitted BT cotton and no food crop has been permitted. Okay, so these are some of the benefits and concerns. But now let's talk about the regulatory legal framework in India for GM crops. Okay, there are certain rules and regulations in India with respect to GM crops. So let's talk about this. Okay, so if a particular GM crop needs approval in India, it needs to take approval from GEAC, Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee, which is under Ministry of Environment. Now remember this, Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee will give approval, okay, but that doesn't mean you can grow this GM crop. The final approval lies with Environment Ministry. Okay, but generally when GEAC gives approval, Environment Ministry gives approval. But there have been cases where the approval has been given for a particular GM crop by GEAC, but Environment Ministry rejected that because of so much pressure from environmental activists, food activists. Okay, but in India, GM crops fall under 1989 Rules of Environment Protection Act, with GEAC under MO, Ministry of Environment, granting approvals after looking at molecular, food and environmental safety tests. Okay, now in India, so far, only BT cotton has been allowed for commercial cultivation. No food crop. No GM food crops are commercially approved amid regulatory delays, public opposition. Plus, India produced BT brinjal, GM mustard, food crops. They were not allowed. Okay, now here is one thing which we'll cover a little later in this lecture, and that is, well, GM crops require approval of GEAC, right? But there is another category of crops called GE crops. They have been given exception. They are allowed in India, food or non-food. Okay. Now, GE crops have been given approval in 2022. Now, what is this approval? We'll talk about this topic when we'll cover GE crops. But just remember, only GM crops are not allowed and they require approval of GEAC. GE crops have been approved in 2022. Guidelines were released that they don't need to take any approval from GEAC. Okay, that's the thing that you need to know. Now, which crops have been approved? We all know BT cotton, but which have been produced but are pending approval. Okay, so BT cotton was approved. BT brinjal, GEAC approved in 2009, but Environment Ministry had to stop it because of opposition. Then GM mustard, DMH11, environmental release in 2022, commercialization stalled by Supreme Court. Environment Ministry gave approval from GM mustard, but activists filed a petition in Supreme Court and Supreme Court actually stopped it. Then there are others also, HTBT cotton, for chickpea, pigeon pea, sugarcane. There are many trials that are going on. By the way, only this is approved. These are in the pipeline, or they were released but they were stopped by Supreme Court, Environment Ministry or whatnot. Okay, now let's gather some more details about the only crop that is allowed, and that is BT cotton. Okay, so BT cotton is a genetically modified cotton variety containing genes from soil bacterium. So you have added genes from this bacteria. The name of the bacteria is Bacillus thuringiensis. Okay, so one particular gene in this bacteria, which was responsible for producing cryproteins, was added to BT cotton. Cryproteins are those proteins which repel bollworm, pink bollworm. Okay, so scientists inserted cry gene from Bacillus thuringiensis into cotton. The cotton plant produces cryproteins. The name of those two proteins are cry1AC, cry2AB. Just remember this, that are toxic to specific caterpillar pests, primarily bollworms. Pest control. When bollworm larvae feed on BT cotton leaves, the proteins enter their gut, paralyze them, and cause death. Okay. I'm sorry, this is from previous lecture. Yeah. So the benefits, well, benefits of BT cotton: reduced pesticide use, increase yield and profit for farmers, eco-friendly, because now you are not using that many insecticides. Okay. So it is eco-friendly, and no harm to non-target insects. The best part about cry proteins is that it attacks only pink bollworm and similar insects, not other species, which was the allegation of environmental activists that this would destroy biodiversity. That doesn't happen. Okay, that would be all. That's all you need to know as far as GM crops is concerned. Now let's quickly shift our focus to next topic, and that is GE crops. Okay, now just listen to me very carefully. GM crops and GE crops are exactly similar, but there is one subtle difference. Okay, both involve gene editing. Okay, DNA editing in crops. Both of them involve this. But the subtle difference is in GM, genetic modification, well, you add a foreign gene. In gene editing, you just do editing, you don't add any foreign gene. Simple. So in GM, foreign gene is introduced. In GE, no foreign gene is introduced. You just do genetic manipulation. That's about it. Make sense? Simple? So let's talk about this. Okay. So let me just stop this lecture for a few seconds because I want to share something really important. Look, along with this lecture series, you will also get notes, exhaustive notes, which you have to memorize. Then you will be enrolled in our WhatsApp groups where you can ask all your doubts, even the simplest of queries. And along with this lecture series, you will also be getting a test series, an exhaustive list of tests tailor-made for your UPSC Prelims 2026 examination. To register, to get access to notes, WhatsApp groups, and tests, you would have to register on our app or on our website. The links to both app and website are given in the comment section below. You just have to click on the link and it will take you to our registration page. So register for Prelims Powerplay 2026 because you have no idea how beneficial this lecture series is and you'll just be spending 1 hour of your day. So join now, click on the links given in the comment section below. So about GE crops. So gene edited crops in India use precise tools like CRISPR-Cas9. It is a gene editing tool to modify plant DNA without inserting foreign genes, unlike GM. In GM, you insert foreign genes. Okay? Now, gene edited plants lacking exogenous DNA, that means foreign DNA, bypass GEAC oversight. So you don't require GEAC approval under Environment Protection Act 1986. Now look, gene editing, there are a few terms that you just have to remember. Just remember, okay? So gene editing is of 3 types: SDN1, SDN2, SDN3. SDN's full form is site-directed nuclease. Okay, site-directed nuclease is a gene editing technique. Okay, or not a technique, but a thing. Just don't get into the science of it. Just remember this. Okay. Now, SDN1 and SDN2 only involves editing. Okay, you modify the DNA. GE. SDN3 is an approach in which you add foreign gene. So remember this. SDN1 and SDN2 are GE, SDN3 is GM. For SDN3, you require approval from GAC, and for SDN1 and 2, you don't require GEAC approval. These are GE crops. Okay, just remember this. Government exempted SDN1 and SDN2 categories from stringent GM regulations since March 2022. If you're not understanding, if you're getting confused by this term SDN, just remember this one thing. SDN1 and 2 is GE, no foreign gene is added. SDN3 in SDN3, foreign gene is added. Simple. Okay. Now, GE crops do not require any foreign gene. Oh, sorry. GE crops do not require any GEAC approval. That's true. It doesn't require any GEAC approval, but it needs some approvals. It needs Institutional Biosafety Committee certificate that no foreign gene has been added. Okay, this is required. IBC certificate is required that you have edited the DNA, but you're not adding any foreign gene. This is required in GE crops. That's about it. Okay. Now, key developments recently with respect to GE crops. India pioneered world's first commercial GE rice called DRR Dhan 100 from Indian Rice Research Institute, okay, and Pusa DST rice. So using GE, using basically gene edit. India basically produced GE rice. Two types of GE rice, DRR Dhan 100, Pusa DST3. Okay. Then they produce GE Sambha Masuri, MTU 1010 rice. So different types of rice was produced, which was GE rice. Now the the tool used for doing this gene editing was CRISPR. We have talked about this, right? We will talk about this more. CRISPR-Cas9. So here is a table which is also given in your notes of approved and pipeline crops. Okay. So crops that were either approved, GE crops that were either approved or are in pipeline of approval. Okay. This is crop name, institution which produced it, key traits added because of this editing, and status as of 2025. Okay. So in DRR Dhan, drought tolerance, salinity tolerance, Samba Masuri, yield increase, all of this. Okay. By the way, ICAR is Indian Council of Agricultural Research and IIRR is IARI is Indian Agricultural Research Institute. These are some of the full forms which are also given in your notes. So don't worry. All right. Now, benefits and concerns. The benefit is editing boosts resilience to climate stress, cuts fertilizer needs, yield under low phosphate in different rice varieties, and enhances India's bioeconomy goal. Remember from lecture number 1, $300 billion of biomarket potential in India by 2030. The challenges are activists are still not that comfortable with GE. Yes, they are more comfortable than GM, but not that comfortable with GE. So this is a problem. Potential off-target effects, need for indigenous tools to avoid foreign patents. Okay. To do gene editing, you require CRISPR technique. Now, CRISPR technique basically was created in some foreign country. They have a patent on it. So if any Indian wants to use CRISPR for doing gene editing, they have to pay for a license fee, and that is very expensive. So India needs its own gene editing tool, an alternative to CRISPR, to bypass this license fee. Okay, that is required. But let's see what happens. Okay. In fact, India has created one such tool which bypasses CRISPR, and it is better than CRISPR also. India created it. We'll talk about it. In fact, let's talk about it. Let's move on to third news item, and that is CRISPR versus TNPB. Now, CRISPR we all know. Okay, it is a gene editing tool. But Indian Council of Agricultural Research created its own alternative to CRISPR, and that was TNPB technique or TNPB tool. This is a tool which is more accurate, more cheap, and more effective as compared to CRISPR for crop editing. Okay, gene editing of crops. Now, ICAR produced this tool and unveiled this tool in 2025 November, recently so. And therefore, it becomes important for us to know about it and its comparison with CRISPR also. Okay, this can be part of your examination. Okay, so pay close attention. Okay, so CRISPR versus TNPB. So first, let's talk about CRISPR-Cas9 technique. Now, CRISPR is the name of the technique, and Cas9 is basically molecular scissors. Now, what are molecular scissors? Cas9 is a protein which acts as molecular scissors. Now, what is there in gene editing? You take the DNA of any organism, and the part of DNA which you want to change, you cut it. You cut that DNA segment, right? For that, you require scissors. So there are specific proteins or enzymes that act as molecular scissors which can be used to cut specific segments of DNA. Okay, that protein is Cas9. That is why it is known as CRISPR-Cas9. Okay, so it is a precise gene editing tool derived from bacterial immune systems. So the way we discovered this technique was by observing how the immune system of bacteria act against viruses. Sometimes viruses attack bacteria also, but their immune system cuts down the virus DNA. That technique was used to create this tool. Okay, using guide RNA to direct Cas9 nuclease, molecular scissors for targeted DNA cuts, enabling insertions, deletions, replacements in plant, animal, human genomes. Okay, now with the discovery of CRISPR tool, earlier gene editing was very expensive, but with the discovery of CRISPR tool, well, it became a little cheaper, quicker, more accurate. Okay. India uses CRISPR for climate resilient crops. We used CRISPR to produce GE rice. Remember? Okay, like DRR Dhan 100 and Pusa japonica. Pusa japonica is basically a mixture of, well, Indian variety of rice and Japanese variety of rice. Okay, nonetheless, the advantages are precision, cost and speed benefit. Genetic editing can be quick, cheap, and more accurate, and versatile. What do you mean by versatility? Well, versatility is that you can use this to edit plants, crops, animals, bacteria, virus, anything. So it is versatile. But CRISPR has certain problems, at least in India's context. Okay. And the number one problem is that problem of license fee. Because the creator of CRISPR Cas9 technique has taken a patent on it. And if anyone wants to use it, they have to take this person's permission and pay a license fee. Right? Now, license fee is huge, and India wanted to bypass it. Therefore, India was continuously working on an alternative tool, an alternative to CRISPR. And India was successful in creating an alternative tool to CRISPR, which can only be used for genetic editing of crops only. Okay, and this tool, this technique was called TNPB technique. So India's indigenous TNPB, transposase B, that's the full form, transposase B, gene editing tool unveiled by Indian Council of Agricultural Research in 2025. Developed by ICAR NIPB and Indian Agricultural Research Institute, it targets agricultural biotech for climate resilient crops, aligning with BioE3 policy, Atmanirbhar Bharat, and sustainable farming. Okay, TNPB accelerates editing, so it's faster than CRISPR, drought tolerant rice, nutrient efficient maize, pest resistant chickpeas, and many other things. Biggest advantage is it bypasses the license cost of foreign patented CRISPR technology. This is the biggest advantage. Okay, by the way, in your notes, I have mentioned this table, which does a brief comparison of CRISPR and TNPB. TNPB is, because it is small and compact, the molecular scissors are small and compact. It's more accurate and efficient. Okay, cost is also low, and for India, it is Indian technique. So we don't have to pay any license fee to any foreigner. You understand the point? Okay, so this is the thing. All right. And now let's move on to last topic, and that is Biotech KISAN. So let me give you a brief overview of Biotech KISAN because most of the information is available in your notes. Okay, so we don't have to discuss it in this lecture. These are just basic points that you have to remember. There is no explanation required. So Biotech KISAN was basically a scheme of Government of India to produce biotechnological applications, biotechnological patents for agriculture to help improve productivity of our farmers. Okay, so the scheme was launched in 2017-18 and it is still going on. And well, government allocated some hefty budget for this. Okay, so all the important points, okay, which department is responsible or the nodal agency for this, like Department of Biotechnology, okay, all these important facts are given in your notes. Go through that. All right. And that would be all. With that, we conclude today's session. So thank you so much for watching, everyone. And I'm sure it has added value to your preparation. In fact, I'm sure about it. But it will add more value if you memorize all of this from the notes, you ask your doubts, and you're regular with the tests in the test series that you get along with this lecture series. So make sure you're following all these 3 steps, okay, along with watching the lecture. So golden 4 steps, 4 golden steps. If you're already doing that, well, there is no need for me to continue further. So I shall take your leave with the promise of seeing you again with another set or another topic in this lecture series called Prelims Powerplay 2026. Thank you, everyone.